Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shovel Knight Specter of Torment. In the last part, we took out the final members of the Order of No Quarters recruits list, and that means it's now time for us to head off and start our endgame shenanigans. But first off, we got one last curio to grab from Red from memory, the Judgment Rush. This is one of my favorite curios in the game, and the fact I usually take on Propeller Knight last means I don't really get a chance to use it, but this is the reason speedrunners go up to that stage first. Grasp this jewel and rush at the nearest enemy. You press the sub-weapon button, you automatically go to the nearest enemy that's on screen, even if they're through several layers of blocks. This means you can theoretically use it to skip certain parts of level design if you're smart about using it and get enemies on screen correctly. In fact, it's for this very purpose that I usually use this to do the next minigame we're gonna do. But now that we've done all that, let's talk to Red one more time before we go. Oh, you have 17 red skulls. I'll pay you 500 gold for each of them. Please, quickly. Oh, whoa, how I long to become lost in her empty gaze. I cannot stand to see another red skull, not one more. Oh, how her delicate mandibles clattered with laughter. Her beautiful brow ridge so arched. Perfect, eye sockets. Wait a tick, I can't believe it. It's her. We found her at last. Red? Red, my love. Is it really you? Yes, I've been searching an eternity. My sweet Scarlet, I'll never let you go again. My heart soars with joy. This calls for a celebration. Join us in the ballroom, Specter Knight. Now that we're reunited, the ceremony can finally begin. Maestro, please. You have our deepest thanks, Specter Knight. I hope you enjoyed the show. How joyous! Let's head back, shall we? I'll find a way to repay you. Until then, please bring me more red skulls. Perhaps we could collect them all? Indeed we can. There is one last reward, technically two, for actively getting all the red skulls, and it's a little awkward with how you have to do that given the last skulls are in the final stage, but we'll talk about that later. Oh! With the juice selection here, we'll be right at home among the commoners. How quaint! Must I send for my private reserve? Why not? I don't really see a reason for you not to. Everyone's come home to roost. I have a good feeling this juice bar is going to be around for a long time. Also, you know, I'm starting to get the feeling, based off the previous two campaigns in this one, that Yacht Club likes animating dancing scenes. And you know what? Given how good it looks, good on them for it. So the final upgrade for our curio is the Judgment Rush upgrade, which makes it move faster and actively makes you invincible, which is incredible for an upgrade. With us getting that, I'm now finally going to head this direction. We saw this screen way earlier in the campaign. I'm the edge farmer, I am. You think you're edgy, you do? I'll be the judge of that, I will. Want to be cool like me? When leaping from rail, try pressing up or down to pull off some slick stunts. But notably, this is also where the third and final red skull is for the Tower of Fate. We could have gotten this way earlier in the LP, I just didn't want to get it until I went further than this screen. Because over here on the far left side, there's this thing we can open. Hello there. Ah, welcome. Few visit the endless parapets, but for the brave I offer a brief diversion of my own design. As if the Enchantress has the time for diversions. I've been here far longer than she. I merely reward the odd seeker of thrills, and none harm me. Care to play my game? If you fare well, there may be a reward. Sure. Then we shall begin. Please board the platform. This minigame is rough. In fact, I actually fail it pretty quickly the first time, and then I jump cut to my successful run, which was about 20 minutes later. The thing with this minigame is we're being chased by Horace and his electric bolt going across the screen, sort of like that one Sonic 3 bonus stage in the checkpoints. But you're going through several predetermined chunks of level design that are randomly placed in whatever order it can be. You might get a rough section to start, you might not. Also, it has Contra Syndrome, so past a certain point, the stage design below you just becomes a bottomless pit. With that said, you never need to beat this minigame. It's only for achievements, really, that you do so, on top of some extra gold. The first time you beat it, you get 1,700 gold. Every successive time, you get 200. The thing I would recommend trying to have for this is at least beating Propeller Knight stage for the Judgment Rush, because that allows you to skip certain parts of level design, like so, at several points throughout it. With that said, you want to make sure you're not super spammy with it, because darkness recharges in here are a little rare in comparison. To help additionally with your movement speed, I could recommend using the Rail Mail Cloak, as if you're good about using that correctly on certain straightaways, you can speed up your movement speed just enough to actually matter. I think the further up you get, there are some level design pieces that will only show up higher up than not, but also I think the higher up you get, or at least the longer you're in this minigame, Horace himself actually does speed up to the point where basically anytime I've actively finished this minigame, because I don't do this every playthrough, usually by the end of it, my leg is shaking because I'm a little stressed out, to say the least. With that said, I do think this is my favorite of the minigames. At least in terms of the optional ones across these first 3 campaigns. I think for all my issues with how King of Cards itself is structured, I think its minigame is probably overall the most interesting. Albeit, because of it being the most interesting, there's also the most of it to do, which can be draining in a radically different regard, but we'll cover that when we eventually get to King of Cards in probably a year or something like that. I have it actively physically in my physical LP list, so I have a point determined for when I want to do it. It's just I'm not sure how long it'll take to actually get there. By and large, whenever I try to do this minigame, if I fail, it's either at the very start or in the last third, though, because that's where I feel like they start to really throw some of the rougher pieces at you usually. Again, they are randomly placed, but there are times, I swear, they save certain ones for certain phases. Like, you start dealing with these jellyfish in the bottomless pits more regularly and all that. It can be rough, but thankfully you never need to do this to get 100%, because all you get for this is gold. The only reason you'd want to do this is trophies, achievements, or feats in the case you care about any of those particular things. I'm mostly showing it off just to say, hey, I basically showed off the entire campaign. There's not really much I'm not showing off in this LP. Especially considering I did, I think, show off the minigame in both of the other campaigns, so I might as well keep it even, you know? I know for a fact, no matter what, though, you always end with this wall jump back and forth to get to the top in time. I've had times where the electricity is right on screen for most of that if you're messing up your inputs enough, or if you're trying to wall cling up it instead of just wall jump up it. Ooh, confetti. I'm impressed. You've bested my challenge. Well done. And I'll take that. I basically never need that money because I've effectively purchased everything in the campaign at this point, I believe. But hey, it's nice to have in the case you died more regularly than I did and all that, or if you died in places that's harder to recover your gold. Also, I forget the exact thing of it. I'll probably see if I can look it up and put it up on screen right now. But I've heard if you talk to the Edge Farmer while you have on like the Ghastly Garb in some form, their dialogue changes, but I don't know the exact circumstances of that. Also, for every Red Skull you give Red after the 80th one that gives Scarlet back to him, you get an extra 500 gold, which, again, not a bad way to get money up. Reese, where have you gone off to now? Donovan, this has gone too far. Your meddling across the valley has impeded my search for long enough. You cannot stop the Enchantress, but as her 8th knight, you could roam the valley as you wish. Even find the one you seek. Never. I would sooner die than join the Enchantress. Oh, that can certainly be arranged. Shield Knight! At last I've found you. Come, Let's leave this place. I'll bring you to safety. Shield Knight. Pledge your loyalty to me, Black Knight, as my final knight. What's happened to you? Come to your senses at once. Very well then. Specter Knight, dispose of this intruder. Donovan, this is madness. We have to find a way to reach Shield Knight. It was Shield Knight all along. She took everything. The amulet. Lewin, she stole my very life away. This ends tonight. No, I must save her. I have to find her before it's too late. Specter Knight, a sight for sore eyes. I might have starved in that cell. The Enchantress is treacherous, villainous, irredeemable. Acolyte, indeed she's gone mad with power, and must be defeated. Can you help me reach her? Yes, a path to the dungeon to her lair now lies open to us. I can operate the mirror too, just like old times, eh? We haven't had a moment to lose. And thus the Tower of Fate properly is accessible to us, albeit through an unusual hole in the ground. With that said, if you do some math, Tower of Fate entrance has some red skulls for us to get still, and that 5 will bring us up to 98. There are only 2 Tower of Fate stages in this particular campaign as opposed to the usual 3. This fate, as well as the usual final boss level, and the final 2 are just in the final boss level. The weird thing about this, though, is because of this shortened Tower of Fate, Specter of Torment actually completely lacks a boss rush, which feels weird considering the first 2 campaigns had that. I don't mind it not being there, given, you know, we've kind of spent the entire game collecting knights anyway. Them suddenly having to fight us again could probably work in the story, but I would probably feel a little unneeded. Helps that the usual boss rush location is, you know, a juice bar at the moment. With that said, the main Tower of Fate level here does the same thing it does in the other 2 campaigns that we've done thus far, where a lot of the things you're going to be doing within it are actively combining mechanics and aesthetics from the prior levels we've already done in order to create the ultimate platforming challenges in the game. This level can be rough, and there's a lot of potential instant kill here, but I think this is ultimately probably my favorite version of this type of level across the campaigns. As well, it's definitely on the deadlier side. I just think it's really fun to get through this stage. On top of that, it's really fun to use Specter Knight's curios to make quick work of certain level design decisions in a way that I find very fun to do, which admittedly is in the previous 2 campaigns we've already done to begin with as well. It's just that I enjoy the movement of Specter Knight so much that it feels just that little bit better to me. This is also probably ultimately my favorite version of the Tower of Fate stage theme, as I just love its energy, because there's something slightly more vengeful about it, given, well, you know, Specter Knight's whole goal at the moment. I love this stage. With that said, this mini-boss is very precariously placed, and I often fall down into the previous room several times doing this particular fight. In fact, that jump cut that we just had is because that exact thing happened like 3 or 4 times in a row. I've always been really bad at that specific mini-boss, and honestly, it's kind of the iffy thing about mini-bosses in this game to begin with, as sometimes they're placed really well in the level design and have some interesting hazard obstacle notes to them. Other times they just feel like that room needed another go, and that's one of the few times that's truly the case overall. What I think is honestly pretty impressive is across all 4 campaigns, with only a few minor blips here and there, the level design feels consistently well done in a way you don't really see a lot of games do, even across a single campaign sometimes. So the fact that you really got this many good quality levels out of one game across several years is genuinely impressive. And I really don't think we're ever going to see an indie game hit this level of quality this regularly, assuming it gets expansions again and again, let alone stretch goal-like stuff. Mind you, the fact this game technically took 5 years to finish across the 4 campaigns probably helps with that a little bit. It's actually kind of weird to think about. I realized while recording this footage that by the time this goes up even, this game's 10th anniversary is either just coming up or was like a few weeks back at most. And that's weird to think about. Because, like, yeah, it's already kind of a thing in the human state where the older you get, the more time seems to fly to begin with. But there's something very specifically young feeling about Shovel Knight in specific, no matter how many years it's been. The fact that it admittedly, again, took 5 years for every main update for the game to come out, and then some, helps with that because there was always some version of it newish in the news feed for a good bit there. But even outside of that, there's something very unique about the energy that Shovel Knight brought, I think, to the indie sphere. Because there was this optimism and excitement that a few other projects had, but didn't really feel like they delivered on across their development cycle. Mighty Number 9 is often brought up as a case of that, given it's one of the major Kickstarter uh-ohs across history. But even outside of that, I really think there is something special across the 4 campaigns and then some of main Shovel Knight that very few other indie darlings truly capture. At least when it comes to like specific general market kind of deals. Because there's always going to be those indie games for people that are like, yeah, this is made precisely for my tastes in games, and because that other people might bounce off of it, but I like this a lot more. For general market, I think this was like the indie game overall, especially at the 2010s. And I don't really feel like we've had something that quite hits that good in the 2020s yet. Although having just recently played through Crow Country, that has potential to have those kind of legs, I think, in pop culture. But I guess we'll see as time goes. Otherwise, it's like, what? The Messenger and Sea of Stars, maybe? Which I cooled down a little bit on Sea of Stars after its release, but I still ultimately really liked that journey. And I will probably cover that as an LP at some point, but that'll definitely be a weirder one because that is a full-length RPG compared to the Messenger's, like what, 6-8 hour long platformer kind of deal. With that said, time for easily the hardest screen in the campaign. This is a giant auto-scroller that you can only survive by precisely using your dash jumps and being patient while still being active. This is really fun to execute perfectly, but a mistake feels costly, especially if several happen in a row. Not to mention, because of the placement of this room and how the bottomless pits are below you, there's probably a lot of places you'll die, where there's just no way for you to recover your money in the case you need some still in order to get certain upgrades that we've already gotten in this LP. It can be rough, especially with trying to bounce off of this particular lamp a couple times, or timing this swinging jump. That especially is where I think I died like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times on my first playthrough. And now for this screen. This is what I call the bitrate killer dimension, because as we go through this, the rain from the main campaign starts to come on in. So I'm sorry if things get chunky for this brief rail grinding period. Thankfully, compared to this equivalent screen in Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows, it is woefully short, because we're already at the end of it. Alright, time for our usual Tower of Fate Stage 1 boss. Turn back, Donovan. I won't let you harm her. The time for words is over. Her fate is sealed, as was mine. But the boy, he may yet have a chance. Steal thy shovel. Black Knight is back, and Terrapin's learned a couple more moves in that they can now hover back and forth. Which you can knock them back and forth using your own dash slashes, but hitting Black Knight from doing so, it can be a little rough with the placement. They can gather bubbles that can then rain down as meteorites across the screen. The Black Knight can bump Terrapin down, causing a shockwave to go across the screen on top of direct contact. He can still do all of his attacks from the first tutorial fight, but now he can fire energy balls diagonally. This can be a bit of a rough fight in terms of spacing and placement. If you knock him off, you'll still have the same deal from the first fight, and that's a very good opportunity to get a lot of damage in very quickly. But if you're not careful, this I'd say is one of the easiest boss fights to get overwhelmed in and die in, let alone to be able to drain all of your darkness gauge. If you're not using specifically the cloak that allows you to have regenerating darkness. With that said, I still love the song. The Defender, I think is the name of this specific title, is one of my favorite songs from the main campaign to begin with, and it still kicks ass here. I tend to use the Dread talent a lot in this fight because that's just my favorite sub-weapon in the game, period, but don't underestimate the Spectral Sentry's ability to have shots that home in a little bit. Don't underestimate the Judgment Rush here, and also don't underestimate being able to generate your little clone and slash forward with a little extra range. That especially can be useful in knocking the Black Knight off of Terrapin from my memory. One stage left to go, though. Terrapin! Forgive me, but I will be stalled no longer. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 8, the end of the beginning. See you guys then.